Your stream looks great in your head, the way you see it and the way you envision it. But when it comes to actually putting it together in OBS, not so great. And some things are just not lining up the way they need to. You always have this little sliver of your camera hanging just over. Or, you try to adjust one thing and everything else just falls apart. Don't worry, this happens, but I'm going to go ahead and show you a few different things that can help you manage this a little bit easier, setting up a nice, professional, clean looking scene. And no, this isn't going to have any plugins or add-ons or anything like that. This is simply going to be what's available in OBS Studio. Don't worry, we're going to get you looking great in no time. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about sizing things appropriately and making it fit. Now, what you'll see here is I have a frame, but my camera's not fitting in it because I just put it in and it came up the entire side. This isn't too terribly hard to deal with. First, you would click on it. Then you're just going to grab and drag and just line it up into the box. But now, as you see down here, I've got a little bit of a problem. It's hanging over. Okay, well, we'll try to fix it. But, now I'm grabbing the wrong thing. And this always drives you nuts. Well, here's one secret. When you are accidentally grabbing something you don't want to, go look in your list of sources and find the one that's highlighted, which is right here. If you go ahead and hit this lock right there, now that's locked into place. So when I go to grab it, it's not moving. Then I can come in here to my camera, grab it instead, and now I don't accidentally grab what I'm not supposed to. Getting it lined up sometimes is a little difficult to do. So one of the things I usually tend to do is I like to go over to the scene, right click, and then I'll go up to where it says full screen, full projector scene. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and choose the monitor that I'm using. Now this works great if you have two monitors. With one monitor, you're going to be going back and forth quite often to do this, but it's still worth it. So now I can see much more clearly that I've got over here this little bit that's hanging off, and this is not lining up correctly. So when I have this window up, what I'm going to do then is just drag things while looking at it and just getting it to where it's going to size up a little bit more correctly. And me, I'm the one that I like to try and make as much use of everything I've got as possible. So that's going just above over the line there. And that's good, but now it's too low. Nope, I have a little bit sticking up there at the top right. Okay, so unfortunately, I've got this little corner up in the top that is just being a pain in the butt. So what I can actually do to fine tune this a little bit more is if I go to my camera and I right click, go to where it says transform. This makes everything a lot easier. So I can go to edit transform and I can do this by pixel. So I can just bring this over and maybe down a little bit. And now that I've done that, there is no overhang on this framing at all, which makes this so much better. It looks clean. It looks like it's set exactly the way it's supposed to. And I've used as much of the camera as possible to where I still have full range and it's not pixelating because I've blown it up too much. So that's one way that we can make sure it's clean. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about, well, what if we have something that's actually a different size than what you've got? So for right now, I'm actually working with a camera that is a 16:9 ratio, which essentially is 1920 by 1080, the standard HD format. However, some webcams actually come in a 4:3 format, and I know one of them that I had in the past was the Razer Kiyo. It, for some reason, did not do the 16:9 like everybody else did. It did a 4:3. So I had to figure out how to adjust this. So here, let me show you a very simple way to do this. So I'm going to grab my camera and I'm going to bring it over. And naturally, it is just not fitting like I want. Like, it's just completely overwhelming. So what you can do, hold down your Alt key and keep holding it. Then when you click an edge and drag, you'll see the green dotted lines. This is cropping. This is basically taking the edges of your image or video or whatever and cropping it down in a way that you can do this easily. This is probably one of the most handy features, especially when you have things that are not matching the same dimension. They're not a perfect 1:1, and you need to just crop out a little bit to make it fit. Using Alt-click is probably one of the most life-saving things you're going to be using in OBS. Now, one of the things that we're still kind of dealing with at this point is the fact that we can still grab and things are going to come out of place, and we don't want that. So how can we make sure that we keep everything together when we want to move it or resize it or anything like that? You have two different methods you can work with. So the first one I'm going to go ahead and show you is I'm going to take my frame that we have here that my camera's currently in. I'm going to bring it down to my camera. Now, for a frame, you want to keep it on top because if you do this, it's a matter of whatever's on top is going to be the topmost shown. So we need to make sure that our camera fits in the frame underneath, and that way we have a very nice, clean looking presentation. Now, what you can do is you can click on the frame and then hit Control and click on the video. This is going to give you to where you can basically have two things at once that you're managing. Now, this you could just go ahead and start dragging and moving and everything's going to be fine. Now, the way you can make sure that you don't have to worry about holding control and clicking and doing that every single time, you have these two things highlighted. If you right click, then you're going to go up to where it says Group Selected Items. What this is going to do is put together a folder, and this I can put camera. Now, when I shrink this down, if I grab just this camera part, I can now adjust all this together without it having to be affected. So now all I have to do is just grab this one set of things and drag them around. Doesn't matter how many things are in a group. Nope, you can put as many as you want. Now, this is a fantastic way to do it, especially if you can keep those folders closed where you don't accidentally grab something. However, there is still the possibility that you could click inside this and still grab something on accident and unfortunately misplace it. And then you have to redo it all. Me, I try to avoid that as much as possible because I'm rather clumsy. So this is actually a technique that's called scene nesting. And this is probably one of the more effective ways, especially when you get into more advanced uses of OBS. It just becomes the most effective way to keep everything organized and easy to control. So what we're going to do, we're going to go down here to scenes and we're just going to add a new scene. And this one I would call my camera setup or something like that. Something that lets me know that this is going to be my camera group. Now we get this whole brand new scene. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and add my camera. And since it's already there, I'm going to add from existing. And here's my camera again. Now I'm going to go ahead and add that frame that we had, that 3x4. And I'm going to add that in. And I want to bring this up to where it is basically the full scaling up and down. And this will make sense. Now, right now, none of this is centered. It's all off center and weird. So what I'm going to do with this 3-4, if you right click and go to transform, you have these options down at the bottom of this list where you can fit to screen, stretch to screen, center vertically, center horizontally. If I go to transform and I do center horizontally, now the frame is centered exactly where it needs to be. And I already know my camera is centered where it needs to be. So first I go ahead and I lock that frame exactly where it needs to be while I'm moving things. Then with my camera, I just go ahead and I take the tops and I just drag it just below. And I do the same thing with the bottom where we get just enough that we have made sure that it's going to fit in the top and the bottom. Then what I can do is hit Alt, drag over, and Alt, drag over. And now I have this, which is a very clean presentation of the camera as we've done before. So this is where we're going to do scene nesting. And this is what makes this method so much more preferred than probably any other. So here on my starting soon screen, I just want to add my camera in here because I want people to see me while I'm starting soon because that's just the way I want to do it. Well, instead of having to manually add everything, I can go up to where it says here, scene. And what you do is you grab that camera setup that you've already done, which is the scene that we put in right here. And we're adding this basically as a source. So when I hit OK, that entire scene is here. So my entire camera setup is here. The best part about this is there is literally no way for me to mess up this setup because this is just the entire scene. It can't do anything beyond that. So now I can take this and I can size this however I want and place it wherever I want. And now I have a camera that I cannot possibly mess up. This whole setup is no longer able to be messed up and I can keep it the same. And I can put it in any scene I want without having to be destructive about it. Now, there's always more things you can do and more ways you can make sure that things are going to work the way you want them to. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to show you bounding boxes and how bounding boxes work because this can be very useful, especially when you are doing transformations of things or you're changing the image from one thing to another, but the images aren't the same, there's a good way to make sure that this all stays perfectly the same. Okay, so for me to demonstrate how to use bounding boxes in an effective way, I'm going to go ahead and use something that I made for a friend of mine that uses StreamerBot and changes the text depending on the inputs and all that stuff. Basically, this would be his psychiatric evaluation form. But this is where bounding boxes can really kind of provide a lot of stability in how you're putting things together. Okay, so to demonstrate this, I'm going to go ahead and take this section, this GDI text I'm working with, and I'm going to reset the transform. Now, when I reset that, it's going to put it back to its original way of basically placing it into OBS. So the properties on this, if I look at the select font, I have it at 256, so it is a rather large font. But what's going to make this interesting and how we're going to work this is I'm going to go ahead and bring this down here, just basically kind of where I want it to be set. Now, we're going to right click on that, go to transform, and right here on edit transform, we're going to play with this again. Now, what you're going to notice is there's one thing called positional alignment. So what the positional alignment will refer to is the exact point that OBS is using to basically create this. So whatever you set your position as, it's going to put, in this case, on wherever you're seeing here, 6497 is the top left corner of our text. So when I change the positional alignment, let's say to center, and I want to have it dead center in the middle of this text, you're going to see that it's going to shift the center of this text straight to where the top left corner is. So now it's moved off. But now that I have that, I can drag and you'll see that it's actually a different positioning. Positional alignment is basically telling OBS where do I want this to originate from. And I like putting things at the center for me because when I start doing add-ons like the move filter or anything that really is going to affect how this works, I like to make sure that the center point is where I want to be, especially when it comes to text and fitting it into a specific section like I'm doing, where maybe that text is going to change over time. It'll stay in the same spot where I want it, but then it will expand outwards as I need it. So then what I can do is I can come here to where it says bounding box type. Now you have some selections that you can choose from where there's stretch to bounds, scale to inner bounds, scale to outer bounds, scale to width of bounds, scale to height of bounds, and maximum size only. When it comes to text, I typically try to stay with scale to the height of the bounds because the height for me tends to be more important than the width. But it really depends on the situation I'm working with. Now that I've set that there's a bounding box type, if I was to come over here and go ahead and adjust the box, you're going to notice that nothing's really changing. What I'm doing is I'm changing the position of this box. And since I've set to the height, it's not going to adjust the size of this text until I bring it down. And so here I'm determining that the size of this text is more determined by the height than it is the width. If I did scale to the width of the bounds, you're going to notice it did expand some, but the farther out I go, the more it's going to ignore the top and bottom. So sometimes, yes, you would want the width of the bounds. Other times, you would say stretch to the bounds, which means no matter how big it is and how you form it, it's going to fit within the boundaries of the box you are setting. Scaling to the inner bounds is basically making sure that it keeps the same scale, but no matter how these bounds go, it's going to choose horizontal or it'll choose vertical and where it's going to center everything. If you say scale to the outer bounds, it's whatever's going to be the furthest out that it will scale to. So if the horizontal is the highest of the scaling, then the top and bottom gets ignored. If it's the top and bottom that are getting scaled, it'll start scaling the size according to that. So it's a matter of scaling to the inner and the outer. Those are determined by which one is the bigger of the two ways of going, horizontal or vertical. But again, for me, I want to make sure that this is scaled to the height of the bounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up kind of where I need it to be. And then the bounding box size, I know that I have set the others here for 50. And I know that typically a 500 width is going to be probably about what I need. Now, I'll drag it to make a little bit more sense on where it should be centered according to how I've set this up. Now, there is one thing that you do want to pay attention with this, and that is actually in here with the size. And the reason I'm going to say to pay attention to this is because you can wind up with a really bad distortion because the size is currently not matching what the bounding box is. So if I was to match this to what is in the bounding box, it's going to look a little bit more exactly like it is. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's not what you want. Sometimes you can make it stretch a little bit bigger and go from there. But sometimes you have to play around with this to get it to kind of scale to where you want it to be. Now I'm going to go ahead and look at this time length, which is supposed to line up with. I'll go ahead and go to the transform and edit transform, and I'm going to look to see how this is set up. Now this one, I've left completely alone, but the sizing is right here. So yes, 50 is correct, but then I have this very awkward sizing right here. So the question is, what do I need to keep these boundaries to? And of course, I'm going to keep it to that 50 that I know I placed over here. Now, of course, if this is not working the way you wanted it to, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what happened? Really, all you need to do is just go to no bounds. It'll reset everything the way it needs to be. So we'll leave it as 500 and 100 because that is a proper looking way of that we want it. Now we'll go back and we'll go ahead and do the stretch of the height of the bounds again. But now we'll go ahead and make the height 50 and the width 500, and we will leave it just like that because now it looks pretty much exactly like we want it to. So now we can take this and we can close it out. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to lock this just to make sure that it's not going to move from where it is. Now, what I can do is if I came in here and put something completely different, I can put something like, this is a new message for me. As you'll see, it kept the height as I want, but now it's going over because this message is too long. This is how you can sit and test which way you need to do these things. So I'll go back to edit transform and I'm going, okay, well, maybe we just need to do it as scale to the width. Now this looks better than what we were doing before. So maybe it wasn't the way I thought it was going to be. It's going to be something different, but you do have to play with this to find what works for you. But bounding boxes is how I've been able to find ways to keep everything in one contained space to make sure that I can always focus on making whatever goes in there stay in a nice, clean fashion. So anytime I have an image file and maybe I have one that is a full HD image, but the next one I'm going to use isn't, well, I still have the bounding boxes to make sure that wherever that image is, it's going to fit inside that box in some way, shape, or form. This is going to make sure that as I change from one game to the next game to the next game using individual images from my computer, now I can make sure that it's always going to look like it needs to by just using bounding boxes. Now, another wonderful thing that you can try out and use to see if this is a way you would prefer to do things is there is a way to snap things together to make sure that they're going to align the way you would want them to. So to make this work, we're going to go ahead and use something that I built for myself inside OBS. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to settings. And when settings loads, you'll already be on the general tab. Well, if you come down, you'll see where there's source alignment snapping. Here I have it currently enabled, but maybe I want to increase the sensitivity. So let's make sure that the sensitivity is increased for me to make sure that it's going to snap the way I want. And then you can make sure that it's going to snap to the edges of the screen, snap sources to other sources, and if you want to, snap to horizontal and vertical center, which was handy if you want. So we'll just go ahead and enable that for now. Click apply and okay. Now those settings are ready to go. So when I add something new into this, now I have this box, and if I was to shrink it down and wanting to snap it against something, it does. You can see that there's not a lot of place. So it is snapping against a couple other things I have. Also, if it on top, it takes a little bit to get it off, but it does snap. Now you can increase the sensitivity, make it stronger if you want to. For me, I'm not one for snapping. I like to do a lot of very painful work. That's just me. But this makes it easier then to snap against the side of something and make sure that it's lining up the way you want it to. The reason I don't use it typically is because I create a lot of my own visuals and a lot of my own things that I have on my stream. And unfortunately, when I do it, I'm not really the greatest at kind of thinking things through to where, how am I going to make sure it's going to lock up prettily, nicely, and everything? I'm terrible at that for myself. Customers, I'm great, not me. Seriously, people order stuff from me. I make sure it is meticulously put together. Me, I don't know. I must hate myself. Now, most generally, I'm operating in not in basically just a standard one window mode. Believe it or not, if you've never done this before, there is actually a way you can have multiple windows up to make sure you're adjusting things on the fly if you need to. The first thing you can do for that would be to do studio mode. The first one on the left side of the screen is going to be the preview window. This is not shown while you are broadcasting. This is showing you what is in line for when you do a transition. The one that says program, that's the one that's currently being broadcast out. Now, the nice thing is if I needed to change something kind of on the fly, when it comes to, I'm going to get ready to change the scene or something like that, and I need to take maybe this and I need to move the whole thing more center, I can do that while streaming and no one knows. I can make these adjustments. Then I can just hit the transition button. So now it is where I'm the one that's hidden, and that is what's on the screen and being displayed out. Now, if I needed to make adjustments in here, I can do that while the other scene is playing. Now, that's one way you can adjust things on the fly while you're still, live streaming or recording, and you still need to adjust things on the fly. That's one way you can do it. But if you're a larger production, maybe you're a church broadcasting your service with multiple angles, or you are putting on a theatrical performance that does have multiple angles, but also needs to be able to show changes in the program, or here's this scene name or this scene name, and you need to manage a lot of that on the fly, but you're having trouble keeping track of everything, this is going to be even more helpful. So if you come down in view and go to the multi-view windowed, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up with basically your program and your preview screen, and then a bunch of the other screens below. This helps you to be able to monitor multiple scenes and see what needs to happen. And if you need to do a quick change from maybe one camera to the other because something's more interesting is happening on another camera, you know which one it is and you can flip to it instantly. The unfortunate thing about that is that you can't actually edit any of that within the multi-view window. So instead, what you'd have to do is then still use your studio mode, and you would have to select which one you need. This way, what you're doing is you're flipping through the various different scenes and you're finding where you need to do transitions, what needs to come up next, giving you kind of a nice visual of really what all you have to work with. Now, one thing to note is that when you do pull up the multi-view window, this does take a lot more resources for your PC to handle. And that's because it's not only having to render the one scene that you're broadcasting and the preview scene that's coming up, but every other scene that it's previewing, because it needs to be able to have every single one of those available and ready to go. Okay, there's one more tip I'm going to leave you with before I go, but if you've liked what you've seen so far and you like having tips and tricks on how to do things, follow my channel, because I always try to bring out some kind of information that's new to somebody and trying to be very helpful to give you the best possible chance to make the highest quality production you can, whether it be live streaming, YouTube recording, whatever it may be. I work with OBS, StreamerBot, and many other things to bring you really the best you can do when it comes to your production. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how to make sure that some things match identically the easiest way possible. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the timer that I had used in a previous video as basically the example of how to make sure that everything is going to be the same size, and just so that way you don't have to worry about manually adjusting it. Is it slightly off? None of that. This is honestly probably one of the more easy things you can do. So here I have this spare second, because with this needs to be a seconds timer, and unfortunately, once it goes below 10, it reverts to looking like that. And I don't want that. So what I have here is this extra 0 that would basically pop up when that timer would be enabled. Now, I could sit and I could try to, as best I can with snapping, try to get it to match. As you can see, it's just not, I don't know, it just doesn't work well. So what I do, I would come down here to the one that actually is the size I want it to be, and I'm going to right click, go to transform, and you can do something of copy transform. What you're going to do with this then, you're going to copy it. We're going to go here, right click, transform, paste the transform. Now, it's identically over the exact thing we wanted, but what we can do, and as I do typically when I'm reorganizing things, I'm going to lock the one that needs to stay into place. And I'm going to move this one over, and now it has snapped exactly where I want it to be. So now if I was to highlight each one of these, you can see that these all match what I want them to be. These are all the same size, and they are all lined up as I want them to be. The copy transform tool is probably the game changer when it comes to setting up multiple things and trying to make them look the exact same size. And honestly, that will also work for anything that is a bounding box. So if you already have a bounding box size and you want to make sure they're equal throughout, you can do that with copy transform, because it will take everything in that edit transform panel, copy it identically, and paste it to whatever other source you're trying to apply it to. This is probably an extremely useful tool to make sure that everything is going to be sized and lined up perfectly the way you want. This way, it gives that fully clean, very professional look where it looks like everything was made to match, that it was made for each other. All right, so that's going to do it for some of my tips and tricks for you for OBS Studio and setting up a professional looking stream. It's kind of now on you to make it look real good. Now, if you have any questions that you want to ask, or you have anything you want to learn, let me know in the comments. Or if you need help with anything, feel free to jump into the Discord server and just ask in there. I respond as fast as I can. And even if you don't stay in the server, you don't have to, even if it's just to reach out for a question. I will always do my best to help you guys out whenever I can. So with that, my friends, I will catch you on the flip side. Hope you have a great day. I'll catch you later.